Just like other kingdoms of the world today do. In fact, in the world today, this world system that we still have some people forming alliances like NATO, that they will come together and form a coalition, and then they will say that their ideologies fit together, and so if there's any aggression, they go to war together. For example, when they are going to go to Afghanistan to fight, it was America alone that was supposed to go to Afghanistan. But many of you will be wondering why Germany was involved in the war, why Britain was involved in the war, why are other nations sending soldiers, artilleries, finances? Why are they spending money? America is going to war. Why is other nations joining America? Why could America go on their own? It was because America was part of an alliance. And when you have an alliance, it means when you go to war, others will go with you. When we get to the book of Joshua, you will see an alliance that Israel formed with the Gibeonites. And you will see also in that book that when the Gibeonites were going to war, they sent for Israel. And Israel came to that war. That was the war where Joshua said the sun should stand still. And the sun stood still. So alliances are natural among kingdoms. I believe all of us understand that point in that I just made in 1 minute. So in the book of Genesis chapter 14, alliances were made. There was a war. After that war, certain regions in that area in the Middle East, in Iran, Mesopotamia, and other places, had the upper hand. And as usual, they made the people that they defeated, they said, you'll be paying us tribute every year, you'll be giving us such and such, you'll be giving us such and such. The countries paying tribute voted after many years. They said, we're no longer paying tribute. So that will be regarded as rebellion. When you rebel, the only thing that can happen is there are two options. It's either the kingdom you rebel against come to war, or they accept that you are ready for independence and they set you free. For example, America used to be a colony under Britain. Britain used to collect American tax, used to tax America, used to make America give them many of their good things because Britain basically colonized the United States. A day came and America said, no more. They and Britain went to war. You will have heard of this war. And America won the war. After America won the war, Britain had to go away and America was free. And that is the how it is with treaties and how you break free of the yoke of a treaty. If you are not strong enough, you continue to pay whatever they ask you to pay. But when you get your strength, nobody wants to be a servant forever. You try to break the yoke off your neck. So this particular team, including Sodom and Gomorrah, wanted to break the yoke of King Chedorlaomer and other kings away from their neck, and so they revolted. In the course of after the revolt, there was war. They met at the Valley of Siddim. They met at the Dead Sea, and they fought. And Chedorlaomer, being the stronger king, won the battle. Now, this is not like somebody that has 1,000 soldiers or 2,000 soldiers. These are 5 kingdoms coming together to fight a war against another, maybe 3 or 4 kingdoms. So it wasn't a small war, it was a big war. They fought and they destroyed, and then they took everything, they took spoils of war. Abraham was not involved in this war. He had no horse in the fight. He had no business with it. He just started a nation, but it was a nation. It wasn't just a person. It was a nation. Let me say that again, because God said to Abraham, "I'm going to make you a great nation." So Abraham was already a nation by the word of God, even though he didn't have the numbers, he didn't have the territory, he didn't have a location yet. It was still in the process, but it was already a nation. He heard that they arrested his younger brother, Lot. And Abraham decided that he was going to rescue his brother. But how do you go to this king and tell this king, please give me my brother? It was impossible. If he was going to rescue his brother, he had to rescue everybody. If he was going to rescue his brother, he had to rescue everybody. So what he had to do then was that he had to get his men together. I think 314 of them thereabouts. And then by night, they chased the victorious king who had Abraham's brother. They chased them down and located them. When it was evening, The Bible said, especially in verse 14, that Abraham divided himself. So this is a very spiritual thing that Abraham did. Many of us, I've prayed ahead, so I'll just tell you what he did. So you know how Jesus Christ multiplied bread. Elisha also did it, multiplied bread, so that maybe you have 5, and then 5 became 5,000, or maybe you have 10, and 10 became 100, or maybe you have 7, and 7 became 4,000 or 20,000, as the case may be. This was a spiritual thing, a supernatural thing that Abraham did here. 314 men couldn't at any level conquer 5 nations. Either they fight in the morning, they fight in the noon, they fight at night, they fight no matter when they fight. I kid you not. It is for 314 men, and none of them died. Just imagine. Many of us will have watched all these films, all these epic films. You are going to go to battle with sword. I will come to battle with sword. Me, I have 10,000 men. You have 314 men, and none of you will die. Those of us who were 300, didn't 300 die as good as they were? Were they not overwhelmed? Of course they will be, because there is no way that 300 people can naturally conquer a nation led by 5 kings. It has to be supernatural. So I think that point has been flogged enough. So Abraham divided himself, meant Abraham gathered his men, divided them into 10 places. 10 places. And then he said, okay, you take this place, you take this place, you take this place. And then they all went at night. And when they went to war, in every place where they fought, there were 314 at every level. So making 3,000 plus or more. And they won that battle without losing one man. That is a supernatural battle that Abraham fought there. It wasn't a natural battle. Go back to your scriptures, comb it very well. You will see that God does not do magic. And the Bible did not record to us that angels came to appear to Abraham, or that he received any form of help except that word that he divided himself. And Abraham now rescued his brother and took all the spoils of war. Imagine, took all the spoils that 5 nations won. Abraham and his men took all the spoils of war, and they brought it back to Abraham's tent. When they got to Abraham's tent, the king of Sodom and Gomorrah, now moving to the higher team now, the king of Sodom and Gomorrah came to meet Abraham and said, oh, congratulations, you are a brilliant man. You fought and you've won and you've delivered our people. Can I have the men? You can keep all the goods. And Abraham said, no. I don't want anybody in this world to say that he made me rich. So many of us usually listen to this and we think that Abraham was talking with human pride. No, it wasn't. You have to understand what happens immediately after you go through a supernatural experience like that. Some of us may not get it, but let me paint a scenario for you. So maybe you are living in a rented apartment and your rent is due, right? And then you went to church, and when you are in church, you are praying in tongues, and then they brought in somebody that was dead. And then you lay your hand on the dead person, you lay your hand and you pray in the name of Jesus, I command you to rise. And the dead person rises up, the person coughs out, wow, and the person comes alive. And the whole of the church was agog, and goosebumps were all over your body. You are praying in tongues, you are shaking. The experience was overwhelming. And then you leave church and you go home. And then your landlord came. And landlord said to you, your landlord says to you, see, I'm going to give you 1 more month. Otherwise, I'll throw your load outside of this house. What do you think? You didn't think you are? If not for me, you will not have a house over your head. I'm your God in this instance. Do you know how you respond to your landlord? I know how I will respond. I'm going to look at the man. I'm going to tell him, Oga, don't talk to me like that. No. You cannot. No matter the situation that I may be in, the reality I just came out of, the miracle I just experienced cannot be belittled by house rent. House rent is far from anything that you can use to even talk to me. So just please shut your trap and walk away. I kid you not. It's exactly what my reaction will be. It has nothing to do with being panicked. You have to understand, when you come out of a supernatural experience, everything becomes small in your eyes. Everything. You do not want anything from anybody. You don't want anybody to tarnish your miracle. You don't want anybody to lay claim to that which you have experienced. And so Abraham has experienced the supernatural. And so he was telling this king that, hey, I don't want anybody to come and put their mouth. See, God has made me a great nation. He has blessed me independently. I do not want anybody tomorrow to come and taint my testimony with any form of claim. Now, the next thing Abraham would do was to give 10% of everything that they got from war to the man Melchizedek. And this brings me back to my opening statement. So somebody said, oh, Melchizedek does not have the beginning of days, does not have the ending of days. He just passed by, a supernatural being. Really? I can tell you somebody else who didn't have beginning of days, or who didn't have the beginning of days, and he didn't have ending of days in the Bible. Because we are on Telegram, I don't want anybody to guess, but I know some of you already know. A prophet called Elijah, for example. Do you know that we were never told, according to the scriptures, who his parents were? They just said Elijah the Tishbite. That's all. As if Tishbite was the name of a place. As if Tishbite spewed him out. And then when he was going to die, what happened? The chariots came from heaven and took him. I can as well call Elijah, another form of Melchizedek. But it wouldn't be true. The Bible later told us that Elijah was a man that has like passions unto us. That means he was not supernatural in any way. Elijah was the same as us. He has the same parentage, the same birth, the same everything as us. Again, it is very important that we note that from the moment that the flood happened and all the Nephilims and all the strong men and all the mighty men were washed away in that flood, that everyone from the days of Noah downward had a father and they had mother. Let me say that again. The flood was basically to get rid of the giants, the Nephilims, the Samjays, and all the strange beings that came to the world as a result of angels sleeping with women. After the flood, and the flood was gone, God started all over. All of us did this maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago with Noah. Noah's children were all human beings. So if this man Melchizedek is a man, they didn't say he's an angel or he's a god. If he's a man, then he's a man that has a father and that has a mother. That has to be well documented. We may not be given his full identity, but he is not God and it's not Jesus. It's not Jesus, because the Bible, the book of Psalm, if you look at your notes, I documented everything. The book of Psalm says clearly that Jesus was going to be in the order, a king forever, a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. You cannot be a priest forever in the order of yourself. If you already Melchizedek, why is he not in the order of himself? He has to be compared to somebody else. So it's not Jesus. And so we should all, and there is nothing like pre-incarnate Christ. If you go on Google now, you type incarnate Christ, you see a lot of people that wrote about it. Makes no sense. The Bible did not say at any time that Jesus will be coming to the world and going, coming and going until one day will not be born. No, there's nothing like that. The word became flesh, the book of John chapter 1. The word became flesh only once. For it is appointment for man to die once, and after this, the judgment. Jesus did not come to the world several times. He didn't reincarnate. So do not let us ascribe to him the things that are not his. Now, going back to Melchizedek. So Abraham saw Melchizedek, and immediately he gave a tenth, not a tenth of the lesser things, a tenth of the top things, of the gold and silver and all the precious things. He gave them immediately to Melchizedek. Melchizedek wanted to greet Abraham, and he said, oh, blessed be Abraham of El Elyon. And you wonder, okay, how did Melchizedek know that Abraham belongs to God? And how come that Abraham immediately acknowledged Melchizedek as a priest in the order of God? How did he do that? And this takes me back to the story of Noah and his children. Like I said, I'm going to eradicate all the mysticism around it. We are going to look at it as it ought to be. God started a new life through Noah. Therefore, the story that we are supposed to see after the flood was supposed to be the continuation of the story of Noah. Okay, Noah was the only man in the world now. He had 3 children. Okay, where were they? What happened to them? What happened to their children? Where were they located? Where did they sit? Where is their... Okay, how come that we got to Genesis chapter 12 and God went into Mesopotamia and he brought out another man called Abraham? And he didn't tell us that Abraham was a descendant in any way, a direct descendant of Noah, like Noah's children. Although, of course, we know that it had to be a descendant of some sort, but it wasn't the direct descendant. We were just so that God just called him out, called his father, and then called him, and then he began to work with him. So Abraham was different, but the lineage of Noah and the priesthood and authority that God gave them, basically the story petered out, so that we do not have a concrete evidence of what happened to Shem, what happened to Ham, and what happened to Japheth. We didn't have any evidence, but we know that these three know God personally. We also know that through their father, they had an encounter and experience with God that was so mighty. As at the time Abraham met with Melchizedek, and the two of them began to speak to each other, we saw that both of them had a rapport with God that no other person in the world had. Abraham was the first Hebrew. Let me say that again. When God called Abraham out, God called him a nation. God changed his language. Abraham was not speaking Hebrew before. He was the inventor of the language Hebrew. His children, his wife, and family were the first Hebrews ever. Therefore, we know that Noah was not an Hebrew, so to say. He wasn't Hebrew. He was saved. He was a progenitor, but he wasn't a Hebrew. Abraham was the first Hebrew. Abraham was the one that was called to start a nation. Ham, and Japheth were not called to start a nation. So we look at all these things, and the way the two of them now met, and the way they greeted each other, we have to eradicate all the superstitious ability that they gave to Shem, to Melchizedek, and look at his antecedents. At that time, closest to Abraham, who was Melchizedek? So you have to go back to the scriptures, you have to look at the Old Testament, you have to look at the Torah, you have to look at the timeline, you have to look at how they live and where they are coming from. So when it says that Melchizedek is the king of Salem, the king of a place called Salem, the king of righteousness, Sedek, righteousness, the king of Sedek, and we are looking at it and say, okay, but Salem, some of us say, oh, Salem is Jerusalem. Okay, so you now understand why a place will be called York, and then another place will now be called New York. Then you will have a place called Pretoria, another place called New Pretoria. You have a place called Lagos. Then you have another place called New Lagos. The reason was because there are some people who came from the first place, who went to the new place and named the place immediately or somehow after the place where they were coming from. Melchizedek and Salem was named, of course, after Jerusalem, but it means that there was once a Salem, which we didn't know about, where Melchizedek came from. It means there was a place called Sedek, righteousness, a city called righteous, where Melchizedek came from, and we didn't know anything about this city. We didn't know anything about this country. All we know was Abraham, because God's spotlight was on Abraham at this time. But Melchizedek was also a man who was a priest of God, who was ruling over a city, and who had a supernatural encounter and relationship with God that was great and mighty. So Abraham met this man, and the first thing Abraham did was to give this man a tenth of everything they got from war. Now, Abraham did not pay tithes to Melchizedek. No, that wasn't tithes. When you look at the scriptures, and you see people go to war, for example, David. Whenever David goes to war and they had spoils of war, they would divide it equally among all the soldiers of David. But they will remove 10% for Abiathar the priest. He wasn't a soldier. Let me say that again. Abiathar was a priest that was following David everywhere. He was the one that would consult for David. He was the one that would help David to check whether the Urim and Purim, what God is saying, what God is not saying. When they give all the fighting men their share, Abiathar collects a percentage because he has a family, because that was what was due him according to how they shared their sharing formula. The same principle applies here. It wasn't a continuous thing because Abraham, of course, met Melchizedek only once. So he didn't give Melchizedek tithes twice or 3 times. It was as a consequence of war. Don't forget, the Bible did not say that you give tithes, you fight war every day, and you give 10% of war. No. It wasn't war that we are supposed to tithe. We are supposed to work and give 10% of our earning to God. But in this case, Abraham went for a war, and Abraham now gave Melchizedek 10% of what he got from war. Do you understand? He didn't give Melchizedek 10% of his property. He didn't give Melchizedek 10% of his profits. He gave Melchizedek 10% of what they got out of that war. So that's not tithe. And all the pastors that used to preach about it, that it is tithe, is because they do not understand scripture. That cannot be tithe. It's like I earn 1,000 naira salary every month. My tithe is supposed to be 100 naira. Then the man of God comes to my house after I inherited the property from my father, and then I gave the man of God 10% of that property. But I didn't give him 10% of my monthly earning. So that means I didn't pay tithe, because that property I can only inherit it once. And once I've given him that 10%, he will not come back tomorrow to collect another one. So that's not tithe. So I just wanted that to be clear. I have nothing against tithe. Tithe blesses us. That is, in fact, more than tithe. I personally pay more than tithe. I give. I'm sorry, I call it pay. I give more than that. I bless my father's house. I bless all his children. I'm a blessing to my generation, and the generation, many generations that will come after me shall call me blessed. If Jesus tarries, they shall look unto me. Their face shall be enlightened, and they shall say, "Indeed, we met one who is like Christ." When they talk about me. This is my testimony, and this is where I'm going. This is my life. This is my life. This is my sunesis. And so I live my life to be the fulfillment of the days of Christ. I have nothing against tithe. I'm just trying to explain scripture here that what Abraham gave Melchizedek was not tithe, was a tenth of the spoils of war. And that is different from your earnings that you have to give 10% out of. So we understand in context what Abraham did and why he did it. That's done. Now, the third thing I want to mention here was the relationship then between the supernatural and the natural. You will notice that every time a supernatural event would happen to aid a natural cause, you will notice that immediately there will be a sort of requirement for the person that enjoyed the supernatural advantage to make things at par. Let me explain it. When Moses was going to leave Egypt with the children of Israel, pay attention, please. Pharaoh's firstborn died, and all the firstborn of Egypt died. Do you know that immediately after that, God said they should tax all the firstborn of Israel and bring the money to his house? Pay attention. Again, let me repeat it. A supernatural thing happened. Angel of destruction came into Egypt, killed all the firstborn of every family in Egypt. Oh, wow, glory! God has given Israel victory. Then, as soon as they left Egypt, God told Moses, said, oh yeah, all these firstborns, all the firstborn, I want money from all the firstborn of Israel. He called, he said the money is to ransom their life. So you have to understand, because demons participated in the killing of the children of Egypt, and God spared the children of Israel. To balance it, God said the children of Israel should pay. I'll give you another example so you can get a balance. When they got to Jericho, Joshua and Co got to Jericho, and the walls were so high, and they couldn't do anything about the wall. A man appeared to him, and the man said, "Oh, I'm the leader of the army of God." The man told him that they should go around Jericho 7 times, gave him instruction. They followed the instruction. Jericho fell. They won the battle without raising a sword. And God told them, don't take anything. No. Everything that comes from Jericho comes to me. Why? Because God was the one that fought the war. So none of them should lay claim to anything. The one person that stole from it, Achan, was killed for it. I'm just reading the precedent so you understand why Abraham, after dividing himself, had an obligation to quickly give unto God the 10% of the loot, because he divided himself and the supernatural supported it in order for him to have victory in that battle. So that most of us here, when we get a victory by supernatural hand, which is a practical lesson you will take home today, when you pray and you see the hand of God, if you keep quiet and you don't share the testimony and you don't value it, I'm not asking anybody to, it's easy to misunderstand people. Anyway, this is me, JSW speaking, so you should understand what I'm trying to say. When you see a miracle that God has done for you, don't keep quiet. Quickly, the same way Abraham behaved, the same way Joshua behaved, the same way Moses behaved, that I just gave examples of. When you see that the hand of God is what did this, don't now pretend as if no, you are wise. Acknowledge that God did it. If you have to give 10%, 5%, 15%, 20, 50%, 100%, give it to God, not to a man of God. I beg you, not to a man of God. This is very important. Give it to the work of God. Acknowledge that without God, I couldn't have achieved this. God did this, and therefore I'm giving God his due of what he has done. This is the example that Abraham set with Melchizedek, and the example was also set with Moses in dealing with the children of Israel when the firstborn of Egypt died. Same example was set in Jericho, and all through the scriptures you will see these examples where the supernatural will come out to help the children of Israel, or a prophet or a minister of God, and the man will immediately acknowledge God and bless him for it.